All right, let's call the meeting order at 6 o'clock on the nose. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Review and revision of agenda. Anybody have anything they want to change, add? Go ahead. Sorry, I don't know who's going first here, Peter or Russ?
Peter, can you hear all right?
I can hear you all right, but I can't hear people in the room. Where's the mic?
Is this the mic right here?
I'll put it closer to you since
Yeah, why don't we do, and then if
it's
Bridgette needs to speak, she can come on up.
Laurie has a real hand up, Sue.
I can't find my hand somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, there we go.
Go ahead, Laurie.
We need to add tuition. We need to announce tuition. I need to add that to the budget, to the agenda, please.
Where do you want to do that? Just budget discussion or?
Sure. Yeah, I can do it around there. It's fine.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing.
Russ wanted to add a review of the Windham Elementary School multi-line insurance review.
Do you
That
want
could be
to?
under old business.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, if not, we're going to move into executive session.
So we were in executive session for legal matters, no action taken.
Okay.
Could I ask, was there a motion to go into executive session?
Yes, I made the motion. Sorry, Peter. We got cut off before I did it.
And a second?
Yes.
Which was?
Myself. Sorry, Peter. Beth.
Peter,
Oh, you moved and seconded.
No,
No.
I moved. Carolyn moved. That's seconded. Can you hear us, Peter?
It's very echoey, so speak slowly.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. We're moving on. Minutes and correspondence. Approval of minutes for August 24th, August 28th, September 21st, September 28th, and November 16th. Do you want to speak to that?
Okay, so Peter, we authorized you to work on the minutes for August 24th. I don't know if you've had a chance to do that.
I have not been so informed.
Okay, so we've moved it twice at least. And if you need direction from Bill, perhaps he can give you that direction. Regarding August 28th, I sent out the minutes that I have worked on. I asked for input from people who spoke at that meeting, and they were sent to board members. So I would move the minutes for August 28th, 2021.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a discussion item.
Okay. Go ahead, Russ.
The discussion is on the 28th. Lisa Bridgette is listed as attending the meeting, and I remember clearly, as do many other people, statements that she made, and they're not in the minutes. They're not in the draft that Carolyn prepared. I would like to see that put in after where Rachel Spangler spoke. And Lisa was saying her children were not allowed to attend the school because she was living out of town in Peru, and that her house was not habitable because it was had mold and mildew in it, and that those are not in the minutes. And I'd like to see them put into the minutes before they're approved.
So, Russ, I sent an email out to everyone that I had contacts for, and Lisa was one of those people. There were many others who spoke, whose comments were not reflected in that. And so if you have the recording from that meeting, I would be glad to have you present it to us.
I will send it to you. As a matter of fact, Maureen Bell mentioned it to me as well, so it's a matter of many people heard it, but it wasn't included in your 28th rendition.
Well, that's because she didn't provide it. There are numerous people who I contacted who did not provide their comments.
I will send you what I remember having been said.
Well, I think I'd like to hear it from Lisa.
Yeah, we have to have a recording. We can't all just decide what other people said, so if you have a...
Beth, I beg to differ, because in Carolyn's rendition, she had lived a lot of things that she put in the 28th meeting that she said that really weren't her words in the meeting. And this is not the minutes to the meeting have to cover what generally happened at the meeting. It doesn't have to be verbatim. And Carolyn took liberty to take, a big discussion in several sections of that particular minutes that she recorded.
So, Russ, just to be clear, everything that I included in terms of other people's comments, including my own, were things that were actually, they were presented to me by the people that said them. I did not edit them. Typically I edit the minutes or I look at them and I correct them. I did not do that for the other folks' comments. I would love to have more people contribute to that. So we can...
I will get something to you tomorrow.
Well, I don't want your version of what Lisa said.
Well, then I will ask other people who are in the room to tell me what they heard.
I have zero volume on here. I don't know if anybody else is hearing anything or if you're just quiet.
We've got the speaker right here. Can you hear right now, Abby?
Is it because... Are we unmuted? Is that why they can't hear us?
I can hear everything that you guys are saying in the room without any issue. It might just be Abby's computer, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Can Abby hear?
I don't know, Abby, are you still unable to hear us?
Can anyone hear me? Is there
We can hear
audio
you.
on this? Because I'm not hearing audio.
We can hear you, Abby.
Beth, so when you look at the screen, you're not actually looking at the camera. The camera's behind Carolyn. So if Carolyn's turned around and thumbed up when Abby speaks, then she would at least know that we can hear her.
How do we do this?
I can try to call them.
Abby!
I texted Abby to let her know that she can be heard.
Can we put on a gallery view so we know who else here?
All right, sorry, we're at a little bit of a standstill here. Oh.
I'm in texting right now with Abby.
Okay.
She understands that we can hear her, so she's gonna have to figure it out on her end.
Okay, so let's just continue with the minutes. So it sounds like maybe we need to table the 28th.
Fine.
And get more information.
Okay, so we can move on to, well, why don't we work backwards? On the minutes from November 16th, and these are so picky, I just hate to even bring them up, but on page 3 at the very bottom, and let me find them here on the computer in front of me. Peter, can you hear me?
Clearly.
Barely?
Clearly, yes.
No, clearly.
Okay, great. Let's see.
I have a quick question about the 28th. I was wondering if it's too late for us to hand in what we need to hand you, because David and I have not emailed you yet, and we were wondering if we still can.
As far as I'm concerned, you can.
Yeah, we've tabled them, so yes, you do still have time. Thank you for asking.
Great, thank you.
So Peter, on the first sentence under FY 2023 budget discussion, Ms. Garland discussed the previous vote to overspend the budget in order to pay, I think that needs to be off the deficit loan rather than of.
I'm sorry, to pay off, is that what you want?
Yeah, pay off instead of pay
Got it,
of
yeah,
the
that's correct.
deficit loan. And then page 5, at the bottom, there's a sentence, the last sentence on the page, it says, Ms. Garland noted that typically a teaching principal, and I think it should say, Ms. Garland noted that typically a teaching principal. So just delete
I
that.
couldn't hear the difference between those two sentences.
The difference is the word a.
Yeah,
And it should read, Ms. Garland noted that typically, instead of Ms. Garland noted that a typically.
oh, right, thank you.
Okay? And then on page 8, I think it's just a stylistic thing, but under public comment opportunity, there are 2 places where you, the meeting house, the town meeting house is referenced. I just think meeting and house should be capitalized, and there's one in, let's see.
One word or 2?
2 words, both capitalized, meeting and house.
Okay.
And one is in the 4th paragraph.
Yeah, I
And one
can
is,
find all that.
and one is in the last paragraph.
Yeah, there's a good search function in Word.
Well, I actually read them all. With those changes, I would move approval of the minutes for November 16th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. November
Okay, so
16th.
then,
September 28th.
September 28th, now let me find that here, sorry. I just want to have the document in front of me. Here we go. This was the special meeting where we approved the November 2nd vote. And at the very bottom, it says Ms. Partridge moved to set November 2nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. as the date for the reconsideration vote. You just need to delete Peter at 6 p.m. because that vote was all day.
Was that the only thing?
Yes. I just want to make sure Peter has it.
I think I do.
Okay.
Great. Okay, can I get a motion for the September 28th minutes?
I'll move that with that correction.
All right, I'll second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, September 21st.
September 21st, Peter, that was the one where we moved and approved the August 17th minutes. However, for August 24th and August 28th, I said that I could not move or second the motion to find those favorable, and I also said that I thought that rather than Mr. Cummings, I think I was the one. That's Mr. Cumming. I noted that there were a lot of editorial comments in the August 24th minutes, which is why we were asking you to redo them. I don't know if you made those changes. And then, let me see, there was another one. I'll give you the thing so you can do the search quickly.
Yeah.
I think it says there is 60 days. I think it's there are 60 days. Other than that,
Okay?
they're good. I know I'm being really picky, but, you know.
No, it's okay. It's gratifying that people read these.
So that's it, and with the changes there, I would move approval of the September 21st, 2021 minutes.
Great, I'll second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Great. So that's it for minutes for now. We have to revisit the 24th and the 28th still.
Yep.
As far as correspondence, the only thing I have, I don't know, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to read your, was a nice gift, well, from a couple of people in town, partly through the tractor parade that Crystal Corvey was putting together, some lovely journals. I'm sure some other items that I don't know about, but I can comment on the journals because my household received one, my teenage daughter, from Louise Johnson. And another gift from a couple in town, Orel and Louiselle, who live on 121, who donated some, have they gotten them?
Yep, the kids all got one.
Okay, I didn't want to blow the surprise.
Yeah, no, they all
Some
got 'em.
beautiful handmade and hand-painted birdhouses, so I thought that was incredibly kind, and I wanted it to be noted.
The kids all wrote thank you notes today.
And the kids all wrote thank you notes. Nice. Great, so that's it. That's all I have for correspondence.
I do have something. I did talk to Lisa Bechet, and there was a question about Book-A-Coke. That is Lisa's business. It is, Russ brought it up on the bills and pay orders. It is a registered catering service, and it is registered to Howard Hill because that's where the Bechets get their mail. So I want to clarify that for the record.
You get all that, Peter?
Yep.
All right. Anything else, minutes and correspondence? All right. Bills and pay orders, we're going to move them to January. I brought the wrong folder. This is my executive committee folder. So that's the way that goes. And on to Mickey Parker-Jennings.
Anybody have a double-sided version? Do you?
Oh, what? Double?
Stuff
No.
on the back. There it is. That's the one. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Students in the upper grade class attended their second field trip of the year to the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center on Monday, December 20th. Students were able to view the new exhibits, have a discussion about them with the museum staff, and then did a couple activities related to those exhibits. Later that afternoon, we had 2 volunteers come in teaching an introduction to French and Chinese to both of the classes. The students seemed to really enjoy that. Students in the lower grade class, what?
Is everybody muted? Thank you.
Students in the lower grade class continue to go to the Grafton Nature Museum once a month for the Mighty Acorns experience to explore the natural world through interactive and hands-on science lessons and activities. Parents are encouraged to join on this trip when they can to see what this opportunity is all about. Please contact Sarah if you are interested for next month. Students earned their first bead celebration of the year. As part of our modified use of the PBIS program, Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports, the students receive beads when they exhibit behaviors that support our 4 core values at the school, which are being safe, respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. Once they earn over 1,000 beads for all the students, we then do something special as a reward. Swimming at the indoor pool is the most popular of these rewards the past few years, so that is what we did today to celebrate reaching the 1,000 bead mark. And maybe this is getting ahead of myself, but Sarah and I talked about it while we were at the pool today, and we're trying to set up maybe at least 1 or 2 days during winter sports where we can bring some kids there to get swimming lessons and do some more swimming. Elizabeth Szymanski began her first day with us on November 30th. Elizabeth will be our school counselor for the remainder of the year. Her focus will be to meet with individual students to do small group work, as well as to work on skills to help the students interact positively. We're very excited to welcome Elizabeth to our team. Last week, Meadows Bee Farm dropped off a manila envelope for Sarah and Mr. PJ to work with the students on their sheep badge. The students had to review 4 harvestable materials that come from sheep and then label parts of the sheep's body, including the internal parts like the abomasum. I just like to say that word. The parent group has provided some sleds for the students to use on our sledding hill out back. This will provide increased opportunities for enjoyment and physical activity during recess time this winter. This, combined with our full set of cross-country skis for every student, will give us some great outdoor activities for recess this winter. We just now need some significant snow because we used the sleds the other day, 3 of which got broken, so we're hoping for deeper, softer snow. Thank you to Greg Frost. We just received another air purifier for the school. It's been placed in the all-purpose room. It's in the back corner there. You can maybe hear it mildly humming. Thank you to Greg for getting this at no cost to the school. That's the 3rd or 4th one. 4th one we now have in the building to keep the air pure and clean. And that is all for me. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Mickey? I don't see any hands.
I don't have any hands raised. Abby Pelton, you still have a question?
No question, just wanted to tell Mr. PJ you're awesome and thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks, Abby.
Can she hear us now?
You can hear us now, Abby?
Yes.
Yes, I logged out, logged back in, so thank you very much.
Great. Okay,
Bridgette
Superintendent.
Blanchard.
Sorry, Bridgette, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't find my little hand. Yeah, Jocelyn, thanks for the foreign language. Jocelyn was pumped to come home with note cards and stuff. That's really cool.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, the kids seem to really like it. Cool.
Where did that come from?
It was offered by members of the community, if you will say.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dynamite. Okay, any other questions for Mickey before we move on to the superintendent's report? All right, seeing none, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've provided you a written superintendent's report, which will be attached to the minutes as usual. A couple of highlights that throughout the supervisory union, we've been able to institute Test to Stay program, which allows students to take rapid antigen tests if they have been in a close contact and are unvaccinated. The likely scenario in our elementary schools, which has logged many days of school in person for students, which has been fantastic. In particular, the 3 nurses that work for the WCSU have been traveling around and making sure that has happened, along with my administrative assistant, Meg Wright, goes every morning to wherever the testing is necessary and supports that team. So just wanted to let you know that that is happening in our supervisory union. And then I've had a couple of meetings since your last meeting. I had a meeting with legislators in the Windham and Windsor region. I had a meeting with legislators in just the Windham region. And I had a meeting with all the superintendents and one of the co-chairs of the Waiting Study Task Force. I say all that just to let you know that the waiting study implementation is viewed as a must-pass bill. Carolyn might be able to give you an idea of what that means in legislative terminology, but we, as superintendents, took that as something that is going to be focused on within multiple committees to see if there can be an end game to produce a piece of legislation that could be voted on by the end of May. Those are my 2 big highlights. Other than I would just like to personally thank Mickey Parker-Jennings for keeping a calm and supportive and joyful environment in the Windham School. It is a very difficult time in Vermont right now, in the United States, in the world, to keep positivity reigning, and Mr. Parker-Jennings exudes that, lives that, and shares that with all that he comes in contact with. And as we head towards a new year, I don't think that we can take that for granted, and I think that needs to be appreciated, and I think that needs to be celebrated. So thank you, Principal Parker-Jennings, for all that you do for the community, the students, and your colleagues. You're a good man, and I'm glad that you're working in me.
Thank you, Bill.
Yay. Okay, any questions for the superintendent? Nope. Okay. Old business, policy review and adoption.
So last meeting, you guys warned all of these. So my recommendation is that you adopt all of them without any change.
So I read them carefully today, and I would move that we adopt policies C1, C2, C3, C6, C8, C9, and C10 as they are written.
I'll second it. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I couldn't hear Russ. Did he?
Russ is muted.
Russ, did you hear that motion?
Well,
On my unmuted, it says host has muted me. Well, there it goes, okay.
Carolyn moved to approve all of the,
I voted aye.
you
but
voted
I
aye, great,
like
thank you.
Not my
Okay,
fault, Russ. I was trying to unmute you when you were trying to unmute yourself.
all right, so the ayes have it. Now, moving on, Russ, you wanted to add something about insurance, the insurance line.
Yeah, we had a very nice report prepared by the insurance company about deficiencies within the school. And I think one of us on the board, and I'll volunteer myself, can go through the school and look at this report and see which items need yet to be done or completed. But I think it's important that some of the electrical issues, the extension cords, be properly fixed and other items like that. So if no one else wants to do it, I'll take it upon myself to go up there and go through the multi-line report and check on those things that have been done or have not been done and see what we can get completed.
Bill, does
Russ,
that,
that's awesome that you suggested that. I would suggest that you do that in conjunction with the principal and with Director of Operations Greg Frost, so that we can be very efficient about tackling those issues.
That's fine with me. I just think it needs to be done.
great, thank you. So you'll coordinate with Mickey and Mr. Frost?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, moving on to new business. We have questions from,
Well-
oh, sorry.
well, there's the FY budget.
Oh, sorry, Laurie. Oh, it's my favorite discussion. Budget. I'm sorry, Laurie. How could I miss that? You're on.
All right, no worries. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. So you should all have a copy of the budget that was sent out, or I guess there were copies in the building as well. I can share my screen if Bill wants to give me the power. For those
The
on,
power shall be granted. You are now all power.
all right. All right, so let me make this bigger. How's that? Is everybody seeing this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So after the last meeting, there were several items that were asked to be put in the budget for this second draft. I went back and reviewed the video, and this is the result of that. And I want to talk about the food service separately. So you'll see that everywhere that I added something for the second draft, I have it in capitals and I highlighted it. So I'm going to skip past that first one and the second one for right now. So that was added, the revenue was added for the food service, okay? Anywhere that the WCSU had approved a budget, I updated that in the second draft. And then it brings us to the direct instruction, where there is now a full-time teacher and a .5 teacher in that line. Okay, so no paraeducator, as the teacher was added to the teacher line. Okay, so that makes 1.5 teachers. Then moving down, world language was also asked to be put in the second draft, and it's put in at 0.10, which is a half a day a week. And I'm just using averages of a teacher is generally around $8,500. I didn't put it in as salary and benefits at this point. I just wanted to make sure that we had that $8,500 in there. Okay, moving down to the school nurse. That school nurse was budgeted before at a 0.01. And now has been increased to a 0.10, which is again a half a day a week. All right, moving down to the Board of Education. Those were just updates from the approved budget. And then you'll see in the principal's office, you'll see where I've budgeted for a new admin assistant, part-time, 0.5. Right, and then we are basically, I'm going to skip again by the food service and down to the fund transfer line. So there were a couple of different items that were brought to the board to put in the budget about having a capital or money towards a capital reserve and also the bus reserve. So this is basically a placeholder right here. This can be divided up how we want to divide it up. We could also add in there a reserve for, special education as that moves forward, and potentially having an increase in that over the next 4 years as Act 173 comes into play. So we can talk about that after. I just wanted to also talk about the food service. So there was also a, down here, okay. So the Windham Elementary food service options. This was presented back in June or July of 21 from Chris Parker. And basically we've just updated it. Most of the information on these sheets of paper were spot on and ready to go. We did update the meal costs a little bit that cover additional expense in food that we're seeing now. We're basing it on 175 days and 19 students. Okay, so the total cost for Leland and Gray or West River to prepare the food would be $32,418. All right, so it's a little bit here about how that would maybe happen. In order to do the food program, you also need to upgrade the kitchen area and so that it meets compliance. So these were the items that were listed here that would need to be purchased to do that. I think we have this highlighted, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, because we thought maybe we wouldn't need that if the dishes were brought back to West River and washed there.
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
All right. So it's a total of about $12,000. It could be a little bit less than that. this is not in the budget, okay? I want to be very clear on that. Would be a capital expense that you could use. You could use grant funds, or you could use your fund balance to do this work here. Okay, so here's where the reimbursement comes in, and it's a little bit confusing. So bear with me as I work through this. But we're using numbers that really we haven't seen in a good 2 years because of COVID. We're getting reimbursed right now. All students are eating for free. That happened partway through last year, and it's all the way through this year. So we're sort of having to go back and really make estimates. Not really sure what the federal government will do with reimbursements at this point. But based on what we think Windham's free and reduced percentages, that would be 8 students, and then 11 students would be paying full. Now, even with full paying lunch and breakfast, you still get a little bit of a reimbursement, because if you remember, the full paid lunch charge was $5.75, I think. And so you're getting a little bit of a reimbursement here. But the bulk of it would be paid for by parents. Okay, so this is what a total of 175 days would be, both parent pay and federal reimbursement. Okay, so that's where this $25,000 comes in. So now, hang on, because I'm going to go back to the budget. Okay, and so this is where it becomes revenue. So the $8,000 here is your federal reimbursement based on 8 students, based on eating every day, breakfast and lunch. Okay, then the bulk of this would be the parent pay. So this is assuming, of course, that all 19 students are eating. Now, if that's not the case, which is very likely that it's not the case, then that 17,000 would probably be reduced. So, you know, food programs are always a little bit tricky because there's a taxpayer portion, which is the difference between the 17,000 and the 8,000 and the total cost of the program, which is roughly in the $9,000 range is what the taxpayers would be paying towards this program. If the student pay is reduced, then the taxpayers would pick up a bigger slice of that. Does anybody have any questions on the food program?
I do.
Hey Russ, what can I do for you?
Well, I'm looking at the equipment list that you showed, which totals $12,295. How much of that would be eligible for grant reimbursement?
I would say probably all of it.
That would be an ESSER grant?
It could be an ESSER, yes. And there also is a child nutrition. Once you're in the program, there's child nutrition grants. Some of them are matching grants, you know, like for refrigerators, that type of thing. Other districts have purchased pieces of equipment as the years go on. So Windham would certainly qualify and probably get a grant because they've never had a grant before.
Does the grant come the year after the service is installed, or is it the year of service that the food service is installed? In other words, does it follow the next fiscal year, or is it the reimbursement during the current fiscal year when the service for the food service is provided?
So it depends on when the grant comes out. So currently there's a grant right now for child nutrition equipment. And so it would be, you know, if Windham decided well, I'd have to check to see even if this started next year, which is really the best scenario, because of getting it up and running. Would they allow us to buy the equipment this year? It would be, I'd have to ask that question.
Okay, and then maybe discuss it with Greg to see what he thinks the timeline would be to complete much of the work, whether it's over the summer, 2-month or 3-month installation, or longer.
Right.
To get a feel for it.
Yeah, he could probably tell us. He's on tonight, so.
Yeah, just given the lead times, I mean, we're at 10 weeks out on an oven right now that we ordered for Newbrook, and still have not received it. So, you know, assuming that you would probably have some lags in getting stuff, and the issue of getting people too is also, you know, a struggle these days. So, yeah, I think, you know, best case scenario would be maybe getting started on some of the tear out and some of that stuff. And getting that done, maybe starting in April or right after school ends. But yeah, I really do think, yeah, it would probably be a summer project to try to, you know, to get some stuff in, to get it out. And the current grant too, Laurie, is, I think it's a 50-50, right? I think it's you get half of what you put in. So if you spend $3,000, you get $1,500. So
there's another federal one that's full, but there's both.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking of the one that we emailed about the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in other words, it might be 2 to 3 months of planning, then ordering, and then the summertime for the rip out and the installation, so it would be ready to go in the fall.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if we got the go-ahead to do it, what we could start to do is just, you know, start to order in some of these things, get them in, and, you know, and then at that point apply to see, you know, if we can get grant funding to, you know, to help with the initial cost of them and the startup, which I would think that, you know, you would qualify for quite a bit, that you're trying to start something, you know, that I would think there'd be a lot of support around that.
Yeah, and it would be eligible for ESSER because, you know, it's, it gets a little more complicated with ESSER anytime you do a construction type project, but it would be allowable.
Okay, thank you.
Laurie, I have a question.
Sure.
It's Beth, well, for whether it's parent group or it's Mickey, have we put out any kind of notice to the parents to see what the interest is?
Yeah, last time Sarah collected this data, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or the end of last year, 6 out of the 11 families said they were definitely interested.
Okay. And so now the parents seeing these costs, you'll obviously will need to continue the discussion, yes? Any parents? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bridgette.
Just a quick question. So, if this is proposed, would the idea be they're making it down at Leland and Gray and then it's coming up here? So, I guess the question is are we also paying for additional staff as a part of that plan?
Did you hear that, Laurie?
I did, and the additional staff that you're paying for, it would be at Leland and Gray, and it is included in the per price meal.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn.
Laurie, what would be the transportation requirements here? Would this be something that could be sent up on the bus, or is this going to require somebody to go down and pick it up?
That's a great question, and I was just about to say the only thing that's not completely worked out at this point is the transportation. There is a food service van that we do lease at this point. The lease is up, I think, next year, and it's it could be used by this same person that we have to hire to help make the food and all of that to be delivered. But the van itself is probably going to need to be upgraded to, an all-wheel drive. I don't believe it. I think it's only rear wheel at this point. So, that'll tie it into everything.
Right, that is for sure. Okay, anybody, do you have anything more, Carolyn?
So I just think it makes a lot of sense to let parents know what's available, Mickey, and what the cost would be for them, and see what the response would be. I don't know when that one went out.
Yeah, that was a while ago, just with generic interest. So my question, Laurie, about that would be then, am I interpreting it right that a parent would pay $9.75 for their kid to eat breakfast and lunch?
Per day, yes,
Per day?
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget Corby.
So I think that information is helpful to like circle back with parents and say this is what the cost is. I guess my question would be, in order to look at that in the budget, do families need to make that decision now? Do they need to make, I mean, obviously, if we're going to invest in a program, but let's say we have a program up and running, how does it work from there? Is it, I want 5 days a week, I want 3 days a week, how does that work in other schools? I'm just like, from a family perspective, trying to figure out what the commitment is, because I've got a kindergartner that would eat peanut butter and jelly every day, but is now telling me he wants to try new things, but I don't really believe him. And so I'm like, are you looking at families committing for the year, or is this like a week to week it changes?
It would be a week to week. We would probably never ask, we have never asked families to commit for a whole year to doing the food. I would say that I would probably downgrade the revenue if I knew that, it sounded like at first everybody was very, very interested in having a food program. So, if that is not the case, then I would absolutely downgrade the revenue, which of course means that the taxpayers would pick up, both the revenue and the expense would come down. But I think it's important to note that, again, if people are very enthusiastic about it, and then reality hits and, I only can afford $9 a week instead of, 45, then I think that we need to be clear about that and have a clear direction.
Is there, if we have, I'm thinking $45 a week for one kid, you've got 2 kids in school, that can get expensive. If we do have a food program and there is some interest over time, are there options for more grants to like reduce that cost for families? Would be one question that I have. The other question is what if you're planning on a certain revenue from it, we don't hit that, does that affect the following year's budget in terms of our tax? Like, are we at a deficit because of that? Because we were planning on $8,000 and we had $4,000.
Right, so that happens a lot. It's not uncommon for that to happen, where the plan is for, these are all estimates, right? I can only estimate what families are going to do based on, what's been done in the past in different schools. And I wanted to show you the full picture first, and then so that it really sunk in of how much it's going to cost. And what the parent participation looks like. I think that, we would just, yes, it would become a deficit. It would either eat into the fund balance that's already accumulated, or in the worst case scenario, you overspend, the budget and you have no fund balance, then that deficit is added to the next year's budget. But if you do have, a reserve 5% or something like that in the district, then it can absorb some deficits on line items.
And so I guess the other question that I have for that is, like, comparing Windham to other schools, it does seem like it's a pretty big cost for a family. We're saying $45 a week. Is that because we're a smaller group? Is that what other schools are paying? I'm just not as familiar with food programs and what it's costing families. So I'm curious what other schools in our district are doing as well.
Right, so full pay has to be, and again, we're, we're a couple of years behind in knowing what the costs are really going to be. But full pay has to be a certain level. It has to be more than reimbursement, and then it has to cover the cost of your food. So part of the reason that it may seem a little more expensive is simply logistics and getting the food up to Windham versus handing it out in the classrooms as being done now in the school. So you're also paying for that because you don't have a kitchen.
Laurie, you have 3 questions on Zoom. Bridget, Russ, then Howard.
All right, Bridget?
Hi, so that $975 a day, that's including the initial startup for the purchasing of the equipment. So the following, right? Am I right? No. That is after the equipment cost.
That's correct. The equipment is not in the operational budget. It would be paid for by grants or by, reserves.
Okay, got it, thanks.
You're welcome.
Then you have Russ, and following Russ is Howard.
Okay, Russ?
The food reimbursement program or the food cost program would be different at another school like the elementary school in Townsend or over in Chester or at Floodbrook, because they have their own kitchens and we have an inflated price because we're bringing the food up here from another kitchen, correct?
That's right. That's what I just explained. Yeah, you're paying, there is a cost to getting it delivered and serving it, and that's
serving it and then cleaned up afterwards.
Yeah.
It's that premium price. What would it be at, let's say, Townsend? What would be the cost per student at Townsend where it's actually prepared right across the street?
Right, I'd have to go back and look again, 2 years ago to see what the reimbursements were coming through for. The reimbursements come through for free students, and then it comes through for reduced students, and then it comes through for full pay. You do get a certain percentage of the full pay. So I don't have those figures, in front of me right now, but again, it has to be more than the free reimbursement. The full pay has to be more than the free reimbursement. So it would have to be probably at least $4 for or around $4, right? For a lunch.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you have Howard, and then you have Crystal.
Okay.
Laurie, really quick, right now if an adult buys lunch, sorry to cut you off, Howard. If an adult buys lunch at Leland and Gray, it's $5.
Right.
So just to give you an idea of what an adult is paying for a meal.
All right, Howard is up, and then Crystal.
I can't hear you.
Howie, we can't hear you, buddy. We still like you, we just can't hear you. Still not happening, buddy. All right.
Do you want to just move on to Crystal and then go
We're
back?
gonna move on to Crystal. Good call, Beth.
So I'm wondering if you opt into the food program, can you say we only want to purchase lunch, we don't want breakfast?
All right. Crystal, are you directing that question to me or to the board?
Whoever has the answer.
That's you, Laurie.
So you can just do lunches, that's fine. That's not a problem. And parents can buy just lunches and not breakfast. So, there's just so many variables to this. And yeah, there's just a lot of variables.
So if you were to just say we don't want the breakfast, we just want the lunch, do you know how much that would be a day?
Well, it would be the same as what the lunch is on my sheet there.
$5.75.
$5.75.
There you go, $5.75.
Thank you.
But the cost would be lower, but the revenue would be lower. So understand that the revenue is completely tied to the cost, to the reimbursement.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the revenue is completely tied to the expense.
Okay.
Are you good, Crystal? Okay, Howie, did we find Howie? Yes.
All right. Hey, so we don't have a whole lot of kids here. How much would it add to the budget and to the tax rate to just pay for lunch and breakfast for all kids?
It's a great question, Howie. Without being part of the National School Lunch Program, correct? So you're not,
Yeah, just picking up what we have. Kids next year. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money. What would it add to our budget and our tax rate? Just say, we're going to buy a bunch of breakfast for all these kids. Because just administering the money of it, it's tough when you're a parent. And there are parents who are not going to be able to afford $45 a week. It's going to strain their budget and put stress on the kids. I need a school or lunch. It just seems so petty. If it's just not that much money to have to pick up the bill to buy
right, so if you just used, a cost per meal, and I'm not sure exactly what that cost per meal is. I have to, talk to probably Kendra at the West River Kitchen to find out what the cost is for lunch. But using an average, $3.75, $4, we'll say $4 times 19 kids times 175 days, so you're talking about 13,000 roughly. That's just for lunch, not breakfast. But you would still need the capital to, have an up-to-date kitchen to serve it out of. And you may need, I'm not sure, Greg, I probably would rely on you to come up with this, but may need a little bit more construction in the kitchen. You wouldn't necessarily have to reach all of the compliance things, and we also would have to check with the state to make sure that you can still opt out and serve. That would be the final, yes, you can go that route.
Oh, sorry, Howie, Carolyn has a comment.
It's actually a question. We could barely hear Howie. So, Laurie, if you could hear him clearly, what was his suggestion?
So Howie's suggestion was to not be part of the National School Lunch Program and to just feed the kids. And what would that cost? And so I said, if you were serving just lunch, $4 a meal, 19 students, 175 days, you're looking at about $13,000. Well, but your capital needs might be a little bit more to, build out the kitchen a little bit more. And then I said the final say is that we need to make sure with the Agency of Education and the Child Nutrition Program that you can still opt out but serve food. So not be part of the National School Lunch Program, but still serve food and not get into hot water.
Okay, thanks, that's very helpful. I have a follow-up, and that has to do with collecting the money. If we were to proceed with this, who would be collecting the money? And I ask this only because I know we did an after-school program. We took a little bit of a bath on that. What happens if all of a sudden the parents can't pay?
Then it becomes the school's responsibility to pay. Basically, the West River in this scenario would invoice Windham, and West River would get paid. So whatever was not collected would come out of the general fund and potentially become a deficit.
And who does the actual collection? Is that the school, like Sarah or Mickey?
The newly hired administrative assistant.
Okay. All right.
Howie, did you have anything more?
Yeah, I would just say for that amount of money, I think, we still have to bring what the general tax rate is going to be for the state, but where it is, it may be lower. I would just say, let's feed the kids and not charge them.
Laurie?
Yes.
Laurie, I think one of your previous comments was $3,000 in the budget is a penny in tax. So 15,000 divided by the 3,000 would be 5 cents is what it would cost in the tax rate to feed the kids. That's from your previous budget scenarios.
Right. I mean, you're already at 9,000 right now, the split between the reimbursement, and so, but we can talk about the, I guess, Crystal has maybe another question, and then I can talk about the tax rate.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I feel like Howie was still talking. Howie, it is a little hard to hear you, but did you have anything more before we go on to Crystal?
No, that's good. A nickel on the tax rate to feed the kids lunch sounds pretty reasonable to me. I think
Okay,
that's all I have to say about that.
thank you. Crystal?
I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Bill, I can't see if anybody's raising their hand because I'm looking at
No
the...
hands, you're doing great, Chair.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk, but I don't know where my hand is. It's
Oh,
Lee.
okay. Lee?
At the end of your arm.
Thank you, Russ. Could I say something?
Of course.
I'd love to see if we might get a budget, Laurie, to build out the kitchen, because it seems very costly to drive food up and down twice a day from Townsend. So I think that I agree with Howie. I'd love to hear more information about that.
I can help you with that one. I don't believe you have the space to properly build out a kitchen there to cook. You would be talking about bringing in a range, $4,500, a hood of $4,000 to $6,000. You're talking about bringing in either more gas or more. The area that you currently have as a kitchen is a closet on the corner of your gymnasium, kind of right behind where Mickey is sitting. You'd lose some of your multi-purpose space for sure, a good chunk of it to have a kitchen there of that size. You'd have to add in a dishwasher, a 3-bay sink, a hand washing sink. You'd be talking about, you got to assess you'd have to have a septic assessment to make sure your septic can handle it. It would get expensive fast.
So Greg, what are you talking about? How expensive would it be? You might have to think about the building.
40,000-50,000 just to do it in that corner, and you lose some of your gym. If you did an addition, you're talking a lot of money at that point, right? Building permit,
If you try to extrapolate out 10 years and you see how much you're going to spend driving up and down the road, we just have to look at the figures before we make a decision.
I can put together a rough estimate. Do you want it as an addition, or do you want it as taking away the corner of the gymnasium?
Well, everybody else talks about getting a school nurse and getting language, and everyone's throwing things around. This is feeding the children. This is raising healthy children. I think we should look at both and see what our options are.
I'll do the best I can.
Great, thanks.
So, Greg, Lee, thank you for the suggestion, but Greg, we have to take our direction from the board. So the board needs to direct us to go do that work. We can't just take suggestions from the public, although they may be great ideas. The board has to hear that suggestion and then make a direction to us to do that work.
I
appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
I don't really understand, because I sat in the last meeting and the audience said they'd like a nurse, they'd like a language, and then Laurie went and put it in the budget. So why are some things accepted and other things are not? I'm not really clear. If you could maybe explain that.
Sure, no, it's a great question, Lee. It's because the board said, yeah, Laurie, come back with those figures.
So, Lee, yes, for sure. I think the point about the transportation up and down, it sounds like Howie has some interest, you have some interest. The people in the past have had interest about having a lunch program. So yes, if we're going to truly look at this situation, then yes, I think we need to look at the options. So Greg, yes, if the board is in agreement, looking at whether it's in the corner of the multipurpose room or we blow out a wall. Does that sound reasonable to everybody on the board? Go ahead, Carolyn.
I think it's worth taking a look at. I'd also love to think a little bit about using the commercial kitchen down at the West River Community Project. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but I think the first step that we need to take is to find out what kind of interest there is on the part of the parents, having them know what the cost will potentially be so that they can, they can make a decision. I see an opportunity for a lot of confusion. Kids might not like what gets served on a particular day, who knows. But I think that that's the first step. Getting the information out to the parents and having them respond. Are you interested in having this service?
So just on that note, Bridgette Corby, before, is that something that between you and the parent group, and I know Alexis, I know you've got a parent group going, is this a discussion that we need to continue?
We could certainly check. I'm confused about if we do the kitchen, if the cost is still going to be the same. So it seems crazy to ask parents if they're willing to spend $48.75 every week for breakfast and lunch when there potentially is another option on the table that's going to maybe eradicate that cost or make it much cheaper than it would otherwise be.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if that data is worthwhile, given that there's other options that might not make it $50 a week.
Carolyn, go ahead.
So
This is on
I
the
would
same
say
line.
that, we're looking at options, and this is maybe the easiest one, is to, do the program through Leland and Gray.
And see what
Because fixing this or blowing out the wall and fixing it is going to be huge. And I'm not saying we shouldn't look into it, but I think it would be nice to know because, after one of our meetings, one of the people who was there said, I don't want school lunch. I want to pack lunch for my kids so I know what they're getting, So who knows?
All right, so do we want Greg to look at what would it take to do just this, to rehab this area? No blowing anything up, just strictly rehabbing this to start. Is that reasonable to the board? Ross, are you listening?
Yes, I'm listening. It's reasonable to rehab what you have there.
Okay,
And
so,
then if it takes off and you get more students and you can afford to blow out an extension at the other end of the building, then you need a kitchen, then you do it, but you do it in stages.
okay, so Greg, does that sound okay to start looking at what it would look like just here in the multipurpose room?
I love it.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Bridgette Corby has been waiting. Go ahead.
So I think that, just speaking as a parent that talks to other parents, I do think there's a general interest. I think that cost could hinder some people if you have 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids in school all the time. I think those are definitely conversations to have. I think that if there's an easy option, and I throw easy around loosely, we'd have to spend money in front, bring food up, all of that. But if there was a way to kind of start small and see if it kind of goes somewhere, that might be helpful. If there was a longer term option, maybe there's some future planning. I think some of my concerns with that is we're not going to get more staff. And so if we're, producing food here, we would probably need to hire someone else because I think that then you start to take away from the education piece. And so, I think there's some creative things that we've kind of thrown around ideas of snack programs, which aren't necessarily school sponsored and stuff like that. But I'm guessing you might have some parents that would be interested in having food driven up if it was maybe not breakfast and lunch, but is that affordable, all those things. But maybe we look at a way to help families without going too big, too fast, and regretting. I think my concern is adding too much work to be done here because we don't have a staff to do that. And I'm really hoping we can get that part-time admin in here, but, to take work off of Sarah's plate, not cooking food. And obviously that's not gonna happen tomorrow, but I think that, I think if we go too big too fast, it becomes a hindrance instead of helpful, is my 2 cents.
Okay, no, that's great. Mickey?
So the other variable that I'll throw out there, I don't know, Bill, if you want to comment specifically on this, but there's that school choice option for next year, and whether some of the families that have said that they're interested in this lunch program end up not even being here at the school next year, because my understanding is some people are making that assertion that they're not going to be here next year potentially or definitively, and that certainly changes the numbers that we've already collected and might change the future numbers as well. So I don't know if, Bill, you want to make any comment regarding that?
Sure. The joy of working with multiple districts in a supervisory meeting is you're not going to know that answer till then. So it's going to be extremely challenging to plan for that in the budget that's going to be voted on the first of March. So unfortunately, I would say that you're not going to know.
Thank you for that help.
So we have a lot, and again, I can't see if anybody has their hand on. I'm still looking at the budget. Bill, if anybody has their hand up?
Laurie Garland has her hand.
Okay.
So would the board like us to find out definitively if Windham can run a food program without being part of the National School Lunch Program, still opting out of National School Lunch, but running a food program?
Sounds like it. Yeah. Carolyn?
We do have an additional hand. Kermit is being very polite. But he has his hand up. So you can answer Laurie, but then please make sure that Kermit gets answered.
No, yes, I'm sorry. It sounds like that is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Laurie, thank you. And Kermit, and then after Kermit is Carolyn. And Nikki? Oh, and Bridget, sorry. Kermit, you're on.
Yeah, my question, and we've already covered it a little bit. I heard mention from Carolyn, is it possible to use the USDA kitchen there on at the West River Community Project? I would like to hear more about that, if it's possible to use that. And also, is there home ec? I don't know if there's another term for that sort of thing, but if a kitchen were to be added to that limited space there, could it become a part of the curriculum?
I love that idea.
Nice. Sorry, Carolyn, did you want to comment on that?
Not on that in particular, but I just wanted to say that as we have learned in the last, couple of months, this lunch, the meal program could actually be something that gets fundraised for. It doesn't have to be added to the budget, so it might be something that the parents group want to think about. The community might want to participate. I don't know if we want to have a spaghetti dinner night where we potentially raise money for a meal program.
Part of that.
What's that?
I can probably answer part of that. At the parents group we met last week, and we are throwing around ideas about fundraising, and I think we haven't totally decided how we want to move forward. It would be nice if we could do some small fundraisers for tomorrow. We have a sign making project, and the parents paid for the supplies and things like that, and the sleds. And we're trying to find ways to not pay for everything out of pocket. The issue is if we fundraise on a large scale, we'd have to become a nonprofit, and that becomes much more complicated. So I think that we're still in the how do we want to proceed forward as a parent group, and if anyone that is working in a nonprofit or has started a nonprofit and was willing to talk through that with myself, or maybe Abby Pelton was asking a lot of questions and kind of brainstorming. I just think that for us to fundraise for a food program, it's to get larger donations, we probably would have to be a little bit more legitimate, which is tricky.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure. Yeah.
Bridget, what constitutes a lot of money? You know, what's the?
Well, right now, I mean, parents are pitching in 20 to 40 bucks together, and I think keeping that small, you know, I think it would be great if we could fundraise on a, you know, more money from the community, but who are you writing a check to? Who's managing that bank account? Just a lot of those questions that I think make it a little bit trickier, and so I think something like fundraising for a food program might be out of our skill set at this time. Maybe down the road. But again, if anyone out there is comfortable with nonprofits and wants to give me a call, I'm happy to talk about it, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to go back to Kermit. We never really, I don't think we answered really any of your questions. They were great suggestions, and I'm not sure how to move forward on that as far as the WRCP. If that's something where we get in touch with the board there, I don't really know what the answer is to that. And wondering if you have any suggestions. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
I know you can.
Unfortunately.
We can all hear you, but.
Thank you. Kermit, are you still on? Maybe not. I still can't see anything except for the budget.
it's muted.
Oh, okay, thank you, Peter.
You had a question specifically for me?
I'm sorry, you just mentioned the potential of using the WRCP kitchen, and I'm just curious as to if you had any thoughts on how to go about that. Do we talk with the board?
Yeah, that was what my question, Carolyn had started to ask about, you know, is there a potential for that to be used?
Yeah.
USDA kitchen. Lunches
Okay.
can be made, it's locally grown, it's, you know, there's a lot of good reasons to use it. And it's right there at the base of the hill. And if it were to become a part of if the food were to be something that all the kids were participating in, it could also become a part of a curriculum in itself.
Great.
Beth, you
Yes.
have a hand up from Ms. Merrill.
Yes, Lee.
Yeah, Beth, I think that if you want to use the kitchen, you guys should make a proposal and send it down.
Okay.
Give your suggestions. I think they'd probably be happy to look at that.
Okay, that was what I'm trying to figure out, how to move forward. So that's great. Is that a proposal that the board puts together? Is that a proposal that Laurie Garland puts together? Please.
Board.
Oh, drats, I was hoping it was Laurie. Okay.
Beth, can I ask a follow-up of Bill? Bill, regarding parent-teacher groups, how do other schools handle the fundraising? You know, do you have to put together a 501c3? Can you raise money under the auspices of the school's status? What works there?
I'll defer to Laurie, but in general, they're pretty, just collect money, put them into an account kind of.
Yeah, we're not talking a lot of money, for sure, but actually Newbrook's parent-teacher or parent group is a 501c3, but Townsend's is not. So we have both, and it's, you know, it's never a lot of money. I think that Newbrook has raised the most through the years for their Montreal trip, which could be, you know, $10,000 or so. So, but they are that group is.
Laurie, do you have any idea of what the max is you can do before you have to establish a 501c3?
I don't, I'm sorry. It's all, you know, it's really, that's the parent group, so I don't really get involved with that.
Okay. All right, thanks so much.
I would also think if you're thinking that you want to raise this money every year, right, because it's obviously your food service is going to be an ongoing thing, and you're saying we want to be able to provide this, that I would think it would probably make sense to become a 501c3. So, you know, like I said, if you're going to be consistently trying to raise funds to support that, then that it would make sense. Another thing I would throw at you as a potential is you could budget for it, and then if you didn't opt in, you could probably do it as a pay what you can. And then that way, whatever people are willing to pay towards it does help save the money that you budgeted. But just a thought.
Okay, great, thank you. Bridgette Corby, and again, I can't see Bill, anybody, so you're gonna have to let me know if there's hands up.
You're doing fantastic, Beth.
All right, great, go ahead, Bridgette.
Can we also, so kind of going back to that simplifying thought process and just hearing the different options, the kitchen down the hill sounds great. My wrench in that would be who's gonna drive it up, because the pizza on Fridays I'm driving up, and so I'm guessing 5 days a week that's just a challenge, so just throwing that out there. So the idea of it being made at Leland and Gray and coming up, is it possible to have Laurie show us the numbers if we're just doing lunch and no breakfast? And could maybe Mickey look at talking to parents and saying, if there was a breakfast and lunch program at this cost, would you be interested? If it was just a lunch program, would you be interested? How many days a week? Just to be a little bit more because you might lose some people that might do it 3 days, and if they think they have to do both breakfast and lunch for 5 days, so maybe look at it from that perspective of what the real interest is, and if we keep the program a little bit smaller, but we're using Leland and Gray's kitchen and not having the staff here prepare the food and all of that stuff, is that a feasible option?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly try to make it as specific as possible and get as much information as we can. I'll say in the past when we've done things like this, we've gotten information and the reality has been nothing like the information we've gotten, but by all means we can certainly collect it and make that attempt, for sure.
Beth, you have Greg Frost, and then on deck you have Sarah E.
Okay. Hey, Greg.
I actually just wanted to answer maybe some of the questions. So one of the things I would say to think about when doing a food service program and running it currently through Leland and Gray, I believe we have 3 or 4 options a day. There's a hot, usually there's a salad, there's a yogurt, and there's PB&J. I believe those are all options every day. So for the most part, kids that want to eat usually can find something in what's offered, to eat. And another thing that you could potentially try to get involved with, if you do opt in, is you could try to get into the universal breakfast program, which is every kid eats breakfast, and so then that money comes in and the reimbursements come in, and I think that helps offset some costs too. I don't know if that's a long-term program. I know it's something going on now, but just a thought of other things you can do to help make sure kids are eating and making sure that kids have options to eat.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Hey, so this is a follow-up, I guess, to the breakfast part that Greg just mentioned. So I guess I'm just not fully understanding when breakfast would even be served, because does the school have an early drop-off, or would everybody just get there and then instead of starting school in the morning, would they eat breakfast instead?
Do you have...
Well, when you did the...
Hold on, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Carolyn and Mickey are...
I was just, Mickey did breakfast for the kids, and how did that work, Mickey?
We made breakfast basically from 8:25 or whenever the bus came until about 8:45. Kids were eating in here and having breakfast. So I had that same question, Sarah. I'm really glad you asked it, because I was wondering the same thing. Does that mean kids have to get here early to have breakfast? Or we just start breakfast at 8:30 and that just, takes up a portion of the morning? So I wonder the same thing. And I don't know who answers that question. To be honest with you, if that's my answer, then I guess I'll have to think about it.
Okay. Sarah, did you have anything else?
No, that was it. So
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that I'm not on a page all by myself. I'm glad you can hear that. I'm on
No.
the same page as somebody else.
Yeah.
Definitely. Same page.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other hands? Any other questions for Laurie?
I guess
Sorry.
in reference, since it was brought up, we did do breakfast here, I want to say for a year, maybe even more than a year. And maybe this is a little self-absorbed to say, but I would argue that that was the best eating that I ever saw happen here at this school, was when we were making the breakfast in the morning. The kids were pounding a ton of food every single day, and it was really amazing to see and be a part of. And as difficult as it was, and challenging from a time perspective and scheduling and all the other things that went with it, it was well worth it to do, and I would be more than willing to somehow make that happen if it could be done here again.
Yes, Mickey, that was very self-absorbed. And you have Kermit with a hand up and Abby.
All right, Kermit.
Immodest.
I just wanted to make a point just so that everyone remembers. There has been consistent criticism that the school didn't have this or that for food. So I just would like for people to appreciate that this amount of time and everything that that everyone is putting towards this is exactly what was requested for this conversation to happen. So it would be frustrating to go into the future and to be in the same, to hear the same sort of narrative about how the school was deficient in one way or another. This, as we all know, I'm just saying, everybody knows, I just want to say it out loud and have it on record, that this is the community, coming to discuss different solutions of how to feed our youngest locals here, and how important it is that they be fed.
Thank you, Kermit. So just to recap real quick, we have potentially down at Leland and Gray, we have to look at, is that going to be every day or not? Is it going to be breakfast or breakfast and lunch or just lunch? We have Greg Cross is going to look at what the cost would be to perhaps rehab the kitchen, the space that we have here. We have the option of reaching out to the WRCP to put a proposal together to see what they might be able to help us with. And was there anything else? Or, yeah, sorry, Carolyn.
So I want to know why Mickey can't do breakfast. If it was so successful and the kids loved it, and maybe some of us community members would be willing to help him out, is it because the kitchen isn't up to standards? Is it something that the parents could write permission slips saying, yes, I give permission for the kids to eat?
That's a good point. Yeah.
It just seems like that was such a success, and I think a lot of folks contributed to the ingredients for that. It wasn't something that was, a line item. It's.
Bill, do you have any thoughts on that?
We just have to follow up the AOE to find out if you were allowed to do that. That would be question one. Question two would be, do you want your highest paid employee serving food for 45 minutes? That's another question that the community and the board would have to answer. And I think once you get those answers, then you guys could decide how you want to move forward.
So that's fine. Those are things we could look into, and maybe our highest paid employee
enjoyed
cooks once a week and just, shows kids that you're able to do a number of different things. And maybe
so
we
you've
have
got 4 people with hands. You've got Kermit, then followed by Abby, then followed by Sarah, then followed by Alexis.
So if you don't
mind,
mind,
by Crystal.
Okay, if can I make a decision here? Can we go to the people who have not spoken yet? So can we please start with Abby and then go
Abby, Sarah, Alexis, Crystal.
So Abby, Alexis, and then Sarah, Crystal, and Bridgette Corby. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Abby.
I think I figured out the unmute button. I just wanted to get some, I know Mr. PJ offered to answer, if it was his, he'd have to think about it. Do we know if that's how, is it up to him? Is that, instead of having him have to think about it, is it something that needs to go to anybody else for approval? If it is decided for breakfast, does it start earlier? Like, how does that work? I guess just I didn't feel like that got answered, if that makes sense.
Isn't what Bill is going to look into?
Yeah, it makes total sense, Abby. I agree, and I don't know who. I'm assuming Bill needs to chime in as to who answers that question because I don't know.
Could you rephrase the question? I'll try to answer.
If we decide to have breakfast here, does it start at 8:30 technically when the school day starts, or do we require kids to get here early at 8:15 to eat? How does that get determined?
Well, the school board actually gets to decide the beginning and ending part of the day. It has to be a minimum of 6.5 hours. You must have instruction in elementary school for 5 hours. So you could have a 9-hour day, and that could be how the school board decides to do it. And then the people that sign contracts to work that day would have to decide if they're being paid fairly in comparison to their colleagues around the state and the region. But in terms of when you start school and when you end school, that is a school board decision.
Just real quick, can I, Bill, before I forget, you mentioned talking to the AOE about people cooking here in the morning. Is that something you're able to do?
Yes, I've got that on my list to follow.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure, whether it's Mickey, whether it's a volunteer, anyway, that would be fantastic. And then obviously you could talk.
In reference to cooking, I'm just going to read you something really quick from the BSI that we had done from the insurance company that Russell brought over.
Yeah.
Greg is frozen right now, but he had a really good.
This is probably going to be a downer, though.
Winnie, there, are you unfrozen now, Greg? Go ahead.
Going back? Oh, yeah, what a bummer.
No, you're back. You're live. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it just told me my internet connection is unstable. That's not all, but all right. So the Windham, the building safety inspection that was done by the multi-line visit. So their references to the kitchen were to bring the cooking operations up to code. And so my concern would be that I don't believe you can start cooking there until you have an up to code cooking area. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. Bill, you're still going to look into the AOE though? We might as well just gather as much information as we can.
I am, I will, and you have Alexis, and then Sarah, and then Crystal.
Great, thank you.
I don't know how many families are on who actually got to participate in when Mr. PJ did the breakfast program, but we were lucky enough to be in it, and Tucker loved it. He eats a full breakfast at home. The kid eats like an animal, and he would still go and stuff his face and come home and talk about how good it was, the egg sandwiches. So I hope that we could bring something like that back. That's all I have to say. I know Tucker really liked it, and it seemed to work pretty well, the volunteers. We would get a list of what foods needed, and parents would just buy them and bring them in, and I think it worked pretty well. I mean, I didn't see the operations. Mr. PJ would have to speak to that, but we really appreciated it.
Thank you, Alexis. Next is Sarah.
Yep. So I just want to say that I would love to volunteer in any way, shape, and form whenever the final decision is made, whether it's cooking, driving, donating food, etc. And secondly, to add to your list, Beth, of just like the keeping everything organized, David had mentioned like grants and like who would be the best person to look up grants that could help feed our kids.
Okay, those are great. Thank you for that. Laurie, do you have any input on the grants?
I could jump in on that.
Okay.
We do not have a grant writer that is employed by the WCSU. Schools that dive into grants fund those at the individual school district level, either by paying somebody a stipend or working with an individual at the school level. But at the SU level, we do not employ somebody that handles that.
Okay, thank you, but it's something to think about for sure. So thank you, Sarah. Did you have anything else?
Not right now, but thank you for asking.
Okay, next is Crystal.
I just want to point out, like, I think the breakfast program was great when Mickey cooked and whatever, but the feedback that we're hearing from people that want a food program is that breakfast isn't so difficult to get, you know, to give your kids, but 5 days a week figuring out lunch, people struggle with it. So I just really want to make sure that we stay on task with the lunch program, because most of us don't struggle with breakfast, but the breakfast program was nice. But lunch, they do.
Great, thank you, Crystal. Yeah, I just went over the list of things that we are tasked with moving forward, and so we're definitely keeping on track with that lunch program. Did you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you. Bridgette Corby.
So, Carolyn mentioned the breakfast program was successful. We weren't here at the time. A few other people touched on that as well. I think personally, I don't really think it's a great, use of Mickey's time to be making breakfast, because again, we're so short-staffed. We did kind of talk snacks, which could kind of piggyback on that idea. I think my biggest block that I came with coming up with this whole idea is the volunteers, the participation. I just don't want it to fall solely on parents, because I think part of this whole idea is it just gets expensive and it's hard. I had reached out to Bill at one point and asked if it would be feasible for the school to purchase something like hypothetically speaking, let's say we had apples, bananas, and oranges in the building, and there's no cooking, it's really simple, and then that's provided by the school. I think where I kind of got stuck on that is, how do you pay for it, and who's picking that up each week and bringing it to the school? Because again, when you actually get to who can volunteer, the list tends to dwindle a little bit, especially when it's a long-term commitment. And then I also spoken to, or kind of emailed back and forth, the principal down in Townsend, and they do, with parents, which I think parents would be willing to do this, is a food shelf where, like Alexis had mentioned, a list of the things that were needed. I think Mickey and Sarah were concerned about if they were to do something like that, the nutrition piece. So one of the suggestions that I had was maybe we have like a do's and don'ts list, so it's not just like junk food being put on the shelf, but some healthy snacks that can kind of sit there, like crackers and cheese sticks, or which is something that's not pure sugar, but stuff that, like, for example, my son dropped his apples today, and so he didn't eat all his apples because they landed on the floor. Could we get something that maybe a bigger school might have a cafeteria? We don't have that, but we have a supply of little oranges. I just think that if that were to be something that we did, it might take a little more help outside of, you guys not as board members, but as community members know someone that could help with that, or anyone on Zoom. If we were to find a way to get like a regular order somewhere at a grocery store, and once a week someone was picking up some like pretty basic produce and the kids had access to that, is that something that as a community we could get a little bit of hands on that? And then again, do we have a food shelf that's through donation and we put out a list of needs? So those are just some suggestions that I think that's something that we could be doing this year as an alternative to a food program, but I think that it might need to be a little bit bigger support than just the parents, because I just think that we're trying to get a few things going, and it tends to be hard to get people over a long period of time to keep doing that.
Yeah, can I just make one comment real quick? I think the food shelf used to be called the Gail Wyman shelf. I think Gail Wyman, that was kind of one of her many specialties, was she always had snacks here. And I think there have been community members who have donated, and that can certainly happen again. And I think a do's and don'ts list obviously would be important. So sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
No, don't apologize. All good ideas. So I'm wondering if we could work with the WCO on this,
Yeah.
you know?
Because I'd be happy to work with Mickey and Sarah to find out what would be helpful and not helpful. And I think that, like I said, I think that there are people that would donate. It would be, you know, I don't know if the school this year has the funds to do it, but even if the school could purchase maybe some fruits and veggies, or if we can get more people in the community to donate to, you know, purchase some, you know, fruit that's just on hand. I just, like I said, I think we have a really good group of parents that are willing to help and are doing a lot of really fun stuff. I just, I don't want everything to fall to the parents because that's part of the challenge with a small community. But if we can reach out to like the greater community and say, can we support this program? Maybe we can get some food. Because like I said, today my son dropped his apple slices and you know, I found out later he didn't eat all his lunch because he dropped some of it. Well, maybe there's something here that he can grab if he doesn't have enough at his lunch. And I think that might just help bridge the gap between now and a potential future food program.
I think that's great. Nice.
You have Peter Barris with a hand up and Crystal Cordy.
Peter.
Yes, I really can't follow speaking from the back of the room. It's just not intelligible. And that's disappointing because she has lots of good things to say, obviously.
Do you want her to, do you need a reiteration, or can we give you we're just continuing to talk about the possibilities while we move forward looking at a lunch program, breakfast lunch program, what have you?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was discussion.
Yeah.
But I just want to put in that if anybody wants details to be heard over here, you're going to have to go up to the microphone.
Okay. Thank you.
Crystal has taken her hand down, so I think that her question was answered.
Okay.
Maybe Bridget, when you
I just forgot to take it down the last time.
Okay.
Laurie Garland has her hand up.
Yes, I was assuming maybe since her budget's still here, she would. Hey, Laurie.
Hi, I haven't left. No, I wanted to talk about the tax rate, but I also wanted to remind the board that of the budget timeline and having to make a decision about this. So you really need to approve your budget by the next board meeting in order to be able to warn it before town meeting day, unless you schedule another meeting in there in that 2-week time period. So I just want to remind the board of the timeline on that. Should I go ahead with the tax rate, Beth?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, again, this is based on the expenses that we just talked about, including the food program, and the revenues, including the food program. So, you know, I have a note here that says minus offsetting revenues, including the child nutrition program. Okay, so basically your expenses minus your offsetting revenue gets you to your ed spending number. So the first round of equalized pupils has come out, and your equalized pupils dropped very slightly from 18.9 to 18.49. So the cost per pupil is $21,000. So this is, you know, well over the threshold, which of course it doesn't apply for this year, thank goodness. The threshold is, I have it off to the side there, it's $19,977, just to give you a, you know, a basis for understanding if the penalty were to come back. The next big news in the education finance is the yield. I think you all received the December 1st commissioner's letter in the superintendent's packet. And I am going with scenario B, which is the more conservative number, which means that the ed fund ended the year with a $90 million surplus. And the $12,937 is with $45 million of that surplus in the ed fund, kept in the ed fund, and the other $45 million is up for grabs, I'll say at this point. But this is unusual. This is not a usual yield, as I'm sure Carolyn can attest to, has been doing this a very long time. So just as a checkpoint and to understand, that 11,000 off to the side there is basically what an average for the yield, a typical average or a typical yield, which would result in a $2.14 tax rate. Okay, so just to give you some perspective of if the yield comes back next year with these expenses, this is what you're looking at. Okay, because we have to think beyond this year. This is a somewhat of a gift and should be used properly and wisely, but it may not look the same next year. So, your tax rate is broken into an elementary piece and a secondary piece, which is because you're part of the union of the West River Union, Leland and Gray. Your secondary students go to Leland and Gray. So the percentage of ADM, of Windham's ADM for elementary is 62%, or 62.23%, and then your secondary ADM is 37.77%. So you're also paying a piece of West River's projected unified tax rate as well. So theirs may not be as high as 220. That's what I have it estimated at right now. That may be a little high, but I'm not going to change it for now because this is giving you a reality of what your tax rate could be. So based on these expenses that were added to the budget, your tax rate is looking to be somewhere in the $1.88 range. As a comparison to last year. Now remember, last year, the penalty was removed as well, so it did drop tax rates, but overall you're looking at 24 cents on the tax rate, 14.53% increase over last year's tax rate. So that's basically, all these numbers can change. What we don't have yet, we think maybe it's coming this week or next week, is the CLA. The CLA is really going to be dramatic this year because of the housing market, and it is the equalizer in the state, so anywhere that there was property selling above market value, you're going to see CLAs dropping, which will increase your tax rate. So understand that this is probably the floor of what we're looking at. I think that it could go up from here. So this is the tax rate. And does anybody have any questions on that?
Laurie, I have some questions.
Okay.
In the budget proposal that you put together earlier this summer, the percentage for the West River students was 30.65 ADM, and now it's at 30. Where is it here?
37.77.
37, it went up, but we have no one in the 5th and 6th grade going into the 6th and 7th grade or into Leland and Gray High School. So how, because if we have no students, additional students go down, would our percentage increase?
I think that your elementary count was down this year. So the percentages changed.
So the ratio, the fact that we had far less elementary students than we had before, pushed up the ratio for the number of students in the secondary education group.
That's correct. And these numbers may change. This first round of equalized pupils just barely came out, and it's we're hearing a lot of news that it may be updated, so I'm not sure. I didn't feel that any Windham students were missing from the count, but when there is a lot of missing students, it affects everybody, right? So, you know, the equalization ratio will change based on how many students they find in the next round.
So the pre-K students do enter into this equalized pupil ratio, don't they?
They do, that's correct.
And we only have 1 or 2 in Windham.
I believe so, I don't have that right in front of me.
Very few, okay. That explains why the number shifted.
Yes. Did you have any other questions, Russ?
Well, I guess it's an observation that if you look at this budget with the services and other things that are included, and you look back at the budget that you prepared for us for a non-operational school, it appears that the non-operational school, even adjusting for the ratios that I missed before, and you corrected, still the non-operational school would cost less tax dollars than would the operational school.
You're correct, yeah, at this point, that is a correct.
At this point, but in previous statements, people were making statements that it was going to cost more to have a non-operational school than an operational school. So there are a lot of holes in a lot of arguments.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
I think we were basing those arguments on the numbers that Laurie had produced, and we've added a lot of things to the budget, which brings me to a point where I'd like to hear from Mickey about some of the things that we have added, like a half day a week nurse, and whether or not that really would be beneficial at all. Does the nurse accomplish what they need to do in the time they're allotted at this point? I mean, this is adding a significant amount of money to the budget.
Yeah, I think ultimately we'd want to maybe get the nurse's perspective and see if she feels like that's necessary, but from my perspective, I don't see it being necessary at all. The half a day a month, I think, gives her enough time to do what she needs to do. She comes into the classroom during that time as well. But I'd be curious to hear her feedback, but from my perspective, that's an unnecessary expense.
I don't know if we want to have discussion about this, but should we consult the nurse?
Sure, I can check it
Yeah.
out.
Okay, great. And I'd love to know a little bit more about the World Language Program. What is that?
No idea.
We had a question about the World Language Program.
We just budgeted, that was a request of the board, our last first draft, to include language. So in different schools, they teach a language. So in Dover, they teach Spanish, and in Wardsboro, they teach Spanish. And so it was requested to price out the inclusion of hiring a language teacher for language other than English for Windham. So
And how often is that per, I'm looking at this.
Half a day a week.
Half a day, thank you. And it sounds like Spanish is, are there other options or?
Sure, we would just have to hire whoever, whatever language we were looking for, we would post that position and attempt to hire that position. The language would be up to the board.
Well, I would think the language would be up to the parents who, I mean, you'd have to have a discussion on what language are, you know, so that's just another.
And I guess my other question is, a half a day a week, an appropriate amount? It seems like an awful lot for a school this size.
Yeah, I don't know much about language in particular when it comes to that. I can tell you that the two people that were here recently doing those languages, I would guess we could potentially get them to come in once a month as volunteers at no cost. And again, watching that experience was very enlightening from my perspective, seeing, you know, how the students responded. And some of them were eating it up for sure. They were really into it and loving it, and others, had no interest at all and really struggled to do it. And I would also make the comment that I think there's plenty of English language work that could be done as well. That would be very useful for many of the students also.
Mickey, what was the language that these folks are teaching?
We had Chinese and French.
Bridget Corby has her hand up.
Do you
want to?
Kermit on Zoom.
Okay.
Do you want to come closer?
So I have two questions. I think to Bill as well, and I know Billy likes to remain neutral and kind of let us figure it out, but from an education standpoint, and you're the superintendent, do you have any thoughts on the need for a school nurse to be up here? And do you see some success in foreign language in other schools, like Mickey's Point? I mean, the kids are pretty young, but I think other schools do a pretty good job. So is that something that is worth looking into? And then Beth, I think Bridgette Blanchard had asked at one of the last meetings if we could bring a student from Leland and Gray as a volunteer. Is that something that?
It's something that's still in the works, but I can give the coordinator there another call.
Okay, there we go. But so I think like Mickey and Bill, like what, like, from an education standpoint, what do you guys think about those things being included?
Bill, I'm waiting on you, buddy. I gave my input.
Might have got disconnected.
Yeah, that was convenient.
That was perfect timing.
Oh, bad internet.
You're unstable, Bill.
He's got like one of those keyboards. Okay, we're gonna have to wait on Bill. But those are great questions that we're gonna need to look at, because it's also something that all the parents, anybody else on Zoom, it sounds like somebody else was on. Abby, did you have a question?
Abby and Kermit both have their hands up.
I'm sorry, Abby, go ahead. And maybe this will help.
Thank you. So I also wanted to thank Laurie for all your hard work. This is beautiful. We've got to see the budget here. And as we are talking about the budget for the school, I just want to remind everyone at this meeting that the community is involved as well, which is how we decide our taxes and our money. This is involved, but the school doesn't fix the town. So we have to make decisions about this budget regarding our children and the future of the school and how we can attract other families and things that are going to be good for the school. So just pay attention to that piece as Laurie, discusses the things with the budget. Keep that in mind. If people think, oh gosh, do we really need that? How is it going to look down the road? How are we going to have other families to make sure we have consistent kids in the school? That's an important piece for many different levels. And but it is bigger than just the school. But we gotta get the budget squared away. And I just wanted to thank Laurie and kind of have people think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby, for sure.
Who was the other one?
Kermit.
I just wanted to make a point that I hope everyone will pay attention to. Once again, Russ has foisted a sort of gotcha to sort of support his continuing with this misnomer about the school's economic viability and how much of a draw it will be on taxpayers. This bad argument that he keeps returning to and keeps repeating, which is very typical of today's politics, is to claim one thing and just keep saying it over and over again until it's burned into the memory of people who are not paying closer attention. There are many different factors that can determine how much the school is going to cost taxpayers. But that was another attempt to just sort of wave flags for people who just want to hear that the school is an unnecessary cost to the community.
Thank you, Kermit.
Bill back?
Bill, were you able to get back on?
I am back on, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Bill, did you hear Bridget's questions?
Yeah, I believe her question was the value of foreign language in a early learning environment of ages 5 through 11. I think it's unbelievably valuable, but the cost is something that a town would have to decide if they're willing to invest.
Right.
And she also asked about a nurse.
I think it's incredibly valuable to have a nurse on site in an elementary school. I think we've learned a lot during the pandemic. But again, the community has to decide if it's a worthwhile investment that they want to support.
And Mickey, your suggestion was you want to talk to the nurse.
Yeah, I certainly will talk to the nurse and see if she feels like it's necessary to be here for more time, but that has not been my perception.
Bridget, did you have anything else?
No, I just,
for now?
like I said, I was just more curious as we like add more costs on. I just want to make sure it's still valuable to the kids, and I certainly think there is, a value in both of those things. It's just trying to decide what is helpful. But I still, like I said, I think Bridget's idea of getting a student teacher to come up and just even teaching the basics might just add a little bit extra, and it could be, it's kind of a cool idea.
And I will follow up with Terry with that.
I agree. I think having foreign language would be a great thing. The earlier the kids learn, everybody knows, the more likely they are to get it, and the easier it is to learn when they start at a young age. So I agree with that sentiment for sure. I just want to make sure it's going to be valuable time spent with the person that's coming, and that they've got the experience to classroom management and can engage all the students, and don't just teach to the 3 kids that really are interested and want to learn, and the other 4 to 10 kids are just sitting there, wanting to get out.
I can't see anybody. I feel like Laurie's still, I have one more question about the budget. The bus reserve, the fund transfer, did we talk about that? Was that the number we originally?
There was really no concrete number that was, as I reviewed the video. This number, this 20,000 could be reduced. I think that, you used to put about $5,000 in for a bus every year, roughly, and then, you could put 15 into the capital for future building needs and that type of thing. Or you could reduce that down. If there's anything else that you want to see what the tax rate does by taking it out, like the food program, let me know and I can do that work.
How about reducing the reserve fund to 10,000? 5 for the bus and 5 for the building, whatever. And Laurie, could you also tell us what we have in the, our so whatever you want to call it, reserve surplus at this point?
Yes. Did I send you the copy of the draft audit yet?
I don't remember.
Does that ring a bell? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. I will get that done. It's in draft form, but it should be right after the first of the year made final. But you would end the year with, I believe it was around $90,000 surplus, but you're going to potentially overspend this budget year because of the paying off the loan early.
Right.
So I think it's right around 70,000.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't have those exact figures, but I thought I had pulled up the audit.
So we could potentially use some of that money to buy down the tax rate?
Yes, you could. That is another way that you can use the money.
Yep, okay. Or potentially use it for kitchen or whatever, boiler?
That's right.
Okay.
All of those are options.
Okay, thanks.
So back to the world language, Bridget, you made an excellent point about, just starting slowly and just kind of taking our time with this. can we take that out for right now, if we're talking about potentially talking to Leland and Gray? And also just trying to see if this is, I mean, obviously it's an interest to some parents, which I totally want to honor. It's just a matter of, is this something that really can happen right now? Or can we work with Leland and Gray and see how that goes? And
again, check with the other volunteers that came in already and see if they're willing to come back, which I believe they are, to do some of that more basic instruction to start the process.
So Laurie, can you take that out just for now, just to see what it looks like, please?
Sure.
Thank you, I'm sorry about that.
Could I make a comment?
Sorry.
Yeah, Carolyn.
There is a family in town who has an au pair or a nanny who is a Spanish speaker. And she is currently teaching the 2 children in that family and me Spanish.
Oh, wow.
One of my goals is to learn Spanish. So,
nice.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
But it's, it's used more of in a conversational way, which is,
nice.
Makes it more fun than just something that some kids will not be engaged in potentially.
So by reducing those 2 line items that we just talked about, it reduced the tax rate by 5 cents.
Okay, thanks.
But this still includes the lunch program. We haven't taken that out.
Right.
And then, we're still going to look at the nurse.
Yeah.
And the lunch program, I mean, that's a big one to not know. Wow.
Yeah, that's a huge chunk of money.
Can we just see, Laura, what that looks like without the lunch program? Just for myself.
You're down to $1.75, so from where you were before. It's a 13-cent tax reduction for those 3 items.
Okay. I'm not suggesting it stay out. If you want to put it back in, go ahead. I just wanted to see the number. I don't know what to say.
Well, I think there are a lot of variables with the lunch program
and
that we need to explore.
Okay.
And the first thing is to get kind of a poll from the parents who are planning on sending their children here next year. And Bill, do we know for sure whether or not we're going to do that intra-supervisory union choice program?
Well, the beauty of that is that will be decided at a later date as well. So the first discussion of the entire board will be on January 26th, and even when they decide it, that would not go into play until after you vote on your budget in March. It would not happen until April.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I think it makes sense at this point to take out the food program, and we need to. You do have the next meeting, and it can be added in. So I think we'll have a lot more information by the next meeting, and it's not that hard to add it back in and come up with a potential tax rate.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie. I just want to make it clear, I'm not at all trying to get rid of feeding the children program. We need to figure out what it's actually going to look like. So that's all I'm trying to do. We've been tasked with looking at different options, so we're going to move forward with that. Were there any other questions for Laurie? And Laurie, do you want to continue? Do you have anything more to share?
I do have one other thing, and it's called the announced tuition, and it's something that the board needs to vote on. You don't often get students in that pay tuition for elementary or kindergarten, but if you don't have an announced tuition, it reverts back to the prior year, and I do think it's probably worth the time to just get something on the books. Last year's average K through 6 K K through 6 tuition was about 15,500. You're at 14,700 now, and I'm recommending 16,000 for this next year.
Do you want a motion?
I do.
I move that we do an announced tuition rate of $16,000.
I'll second it. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that passes. Great.
Now, I think Laurie had some questions from Bridgette Blanchard.
Yep. So if everybody's all set with the budget discussion, we're going to move on to new business. We have some questions from Bridgette Blanchard. Laurie, are you all set to?
Oh, yes, I'm all set to move on. There is no direction at this point other than in exploring, doing a deeper dive into the food program and the taking out of world language and reducing the capital, right? There's no other direction from the board at this point for the next meeting.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, I'm good then.
Thank you.
I will stop sharing.
So Laurie, if I hear from the nurse, you can just make that change on the fly?
If I'm directed by the board to.
Correct, not by me.
So, am I directed to do that?
No, I'm saying once I speak with Abby and I get that information back from her and I let the board know, they can then let you know.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, good.
Great, okay, Bridgette Blanchard's questions. How do we want to?
I have them in front of me if you want me to read
Great.
them.
Yeah.
So, and I hope this is the right email, Bridgette. If I'm not, you can correct me. She says, I've been in communications with Bill and Leland and Gray's VP Johanna about the contract of Windham kids needing to attend Leland and Gray for grades 7th and 8th. Can you tell me the dollar amounts for the past 5 years Windham has paid for students to attend 7th and 8th at Leland and Gray? Johanna has given me this info for the past 5 years. Of the 6 students from Windham that didn't continue on to high school here, this is the info I have. 3 students transferred to other districts after the 7th grade. 2 students transferred to home study after 7th grade. One of these students was due to COVID. 1 student completed 8th grade and transferred out. The student was partially homeschooled during the 7th grade. I'd like to see if you could come up with a budget to include Windham students and not include Windham students for 7th and 8th. Based off of 5 years, it's averaging about 1.2 people per year. I'd like to have realistic numbers on hand to present to the board. Laurie?
So I can jump in on that. So that is a very, very, very complicated question because you are a member. Windham School District is a member of the West River School District for 7 through 12. So even the idea that you would change from not being a member of the West River School District from 7 through 12 is a process in and of itself. So that's 1. 2, you would have to go through a process of asking the Windham voters to be released from the West River agreement. Then you'd have to get a unanimous vote from each of the 4 towns that are also members of the West River agreement. And because the agreement is 7 through 12, you'd have to craft the agreement only 7th and 8th. So does that mean that the request is that you would have 9 through 12 have to attend Leland and Gray? I'm just trying to point out that these are complicated questions that could not be done during the budget building process. So I can guarantee you none of this work can be done before your town meeting. Because we are building 5 other district budgets at the exact same time we're building Windows.
Thanks, Bill. I don't know if Bridgette has any follow-ups. I will say that I can't remember, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we actually pursued getting ourselves out of the West River District. At the time, it was the Leland and Gray middle high school district, and we worked really hard. Kathy Scott and I, in particular, attended all the meetings, making our pitch, and remarkably, we were supported in Brookline and Newfane. However, Jamaica and Townsend did not let us out, so that failed.
You have questions from Peter Barris, Bridgette, and Laurie.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, could you send me those questions? I couldn't keep up with that.
Sure, of course. Can you?
Oh, sure.
Yep, Carolyn will do that.
I'm going to forward you this email right now.
Bridgette.
Before I forget.
So high school choice is like a thing in Vermont, right?
Only for public school.
And only
Okay.
only 9 through 12.
Correct.
Right. So getting out of the district, so how does the payment work for kids that go to Green Mountain? For
There
ninth
is
grade through 12?
no money changes hands. There's a process that happens in February that an individual applies and is accepted for school choice if there is room to that high school from another high school.
Okay. All right, so I guess the next thing to do to move forward with this would be to talk to the town and try to see if the town would vote for this to pass. And then do what Carolyn and Kathy did a couple of years ago and try to do this again.
Yes, that would be the path. If the end goal was to not have to attend Leland and Gray in 7th and 8th, default attend Leland and Gray 9 through 12 with the option of public school choice. Yes, Bridgette, you are correct. It would be the same path that Carolyn just explained.
Okay, well, I'm happy to go to the meetings and all of that. So I can just talk with the board about the next steps, I guess, to do that.
Cool.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, Bridgette. Were there any other questions?
Laurie has her hand up.
Sorry, yes, Laurie.
I just wanted to make sure that there's clarity around the funding of secondary. Because you are part of a union, I just want to make sure. I've had this question come up actually a few times. Windham does not pay tuition, right? It's whatever that tuition is, $18,900, does not pay tuition to Leland and Gray. It's done through the tax rate, which we just discussed, and that was that percentage. There's a certain amount of money that the town of Windham pays to West River for secondary based on that tax rate calculation. So I just want everybody to understand that and be clear that it's not tuition.
Thank you. Okay. Aw. Okay, other business.
I would like to learn how to play Go Fish without email.
I thought I was muted.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's nice to hear. Okay, I'm not hearing anything for other business, so.
Peter Bear still has his hand up. I don't know if he has
okay.
it up or he has a question.
Sorry, just forgot where my hand was.
Okay.
Could I follow up with Peter?
Yeah.
Peter, I just sent you that email, so if you didn't get it, let me know and I'll try again.
Thank you.
Now public comment opportunity.
I
think he said he got it.
Okay.
Good.
You have a hand from Crystal.
Crystal.
I'm wondering if Mickey can touch base on the winter sports program, how it's gonna work. Haven't heard a lot of feedback on it. I know some people are going to Stratton. We're not gonna do that this year. So I'm wondering, do the kids stay at school till 3? Do they have to be picked up at noon? How is that working this year?
There are some kids going to Stratton, like you said. The plan is to try to offer something here at the school for the kids to do, whether it's cross-country skiing out back or sledding out back on the hill or just being outside and playing in the snow. I've talked to a couple of parents about potentially helping out with that process. And as I mentioned earlier, Sarah and I checked at the pool today to see about the possibility of maybe bringing some kids there for swim lessons on Wednesdays during winter sports as well. So I guess all the details haven't been fully ironed out, but as it stands now, the plan is to have the kids doing something either here or at the pool or cross-country skiing if they're not going to Stratton, so that that can be something they can do until 2:30 or 3 o'clock on those days. I haven't talked with Cord yet about a bus bringing the kids home at the end of that day, or if parents are going to pick kids up, or how that's going to work yet. But that's what I know. I hope that helps.
Do you, know when you'll have, kind of concrete, this is what's gonna happen? They have the option to go swimming, or, if you have to pick them up, would that be after break?
My guess would be yes. Definitively, we would know after break.
Do you know, I'm sorry, do you know when the first day of winter sports is at Leland and Gray? I just got it and I can't remember the date, but it wasn't,
Typically, it's not the first
it's not.
Wednesday we get back, but
No.
it starts the week after that, usually.
Yeah.
I think it starts the first week of March.
It does.
And are you guys doing 5 winter sport days?
In the past, we've done 10, so again, that hasn't been fully established yet either. My preference is to do it as long as possible because I think it's worthwhile to get the kids out and doing things, but we are certainly up for discussion with regard to how many days we do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think Leland and Gray is only 6 days this
So
year.
I think just that starts on
That first Wednesday back.
First Wednesday. We've talked to parents about coming to volunteer. I don't have any volunteers for the first, I think, because it kind of snuck up. And I just think a lot of parents are working, so, if there are people that want to volunteer to come, hopefully we'll snow, to go sledding with the kids that are here. I think
Ideally.
that would be super helpful too. So I think once it gets going, more people might be available. I just don't think I have anyone.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it comes down to it, I'll be here and I'll have the kids and I'll do something fun with them. So
Nice.
we'll figure something out.
Anybody else on public comment?
You have Alexis?
Alexis?
Oh, just speaking to the Wednesdays, Tucker will be snowboarding, but I have taken Wednesdays off of work, so I'll be there to do things with the kids too.
Awesome.
So it's more adult.
Great, thank you.
Nice, thank
too,
you.
next week.
Anybody else? Howie?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mickey, and I want to thank the members of the board who are actively working to keep our school going so much from the bottom of my heart and what we do. From myself and my 3 kids who all have graduated from elementary and are doing awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howie.
Thanks, Howie.
You have a hand from Sarah?
Sarah?
Hey, sorry if this was mentioned already. We were doing bedtime, so I missed it. I was just wondering if there was a final count as to how many kids were actually doing the GIST program.
That's a great question, Sarah. I was looking for that same information. I can tell you that from Stratton's perspective, the GIST program has gone downhill drastically. They used to be in constant communication with me and give me an updated list of who signed up, who's done their preparations, who's gone to the clinics, and who has not. I've gotten nothing from them this year. I emailed the woman in charge of the program 2 days ago, giving that same sentiment that I just gave to you, and I've still not heard anything back. So I'm not sure.
I think it's like I think it's like 50-50 from what I've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few kids that claim they're going, and so I don't have specific numbers, and I don't know why they're not giving me that information from Stratton, but I will email her again.
I can tell you that Dan had a similar experience with Stratton doing the training. He was like, it was not very organized.
It's not, it's
so
terrible.
We're also curious how that will pan out.
Yes.
Sarah, did you have anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, a follow-up, I guess, to that is, so Althea's homeschool status does not interfere, I guess, at all with you guys and what you need for volunteers or whatever. Anyways, so David and I have signed up, or we already have our passes, and then just to follow up with you, what you said, Mickey, about not getting information back, I asked the day I got my pass if I could have Althea's pass, and they said that they haven't figured out all the kids' stuff yet, and I'm like, so when are we going to get our passes? And she's like, you know, we'll probably bring them to the school after break. I'm like, what? Like, okay, sure. Because I mean, I don't know how else we're supposed to get passes if you guys don't get them from the school. And then it's like, if the first day of gist is the first week back to school, it's like, it's like super crunch time. So as soon as you find out, I would love to know more.
Absolutely, and again, in the past, they've made a point to get the passes here so the kids could use them over Christmas vacation.
Yeah.
And that has not happened, so that program has gone in the toilet as far as I'm concerned from the Stratton perspective.
That's a bummer to hear.
It is, it's terrible, because it was a great thing for a lot of years.
Okay. All right, well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Were there anybody else?
Do not have any
Okay.
hands or any people waving.
Okay, great. Then we will meet again on January 18th, if not before. We have a lot of things to get out there and make some more decisions. So unless there's anything else, we're going to adjourn the meeting at, what time is it? I can't see.
8:33.
8:33.